Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. She's in, she's out, she might be in. Miss Blasey Ford, through her attorneys, now suggesting she's open to testifying, but only under certain conditions.
On her terms.
Right.
Yeah.
Among them, her representatives will have sole discretion over sets, backdrops, banners, scenery, logos, settings, which in any way related to her testimony or any other activities associated with her appearance before the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Senate Judiciary Committee will reserve 20 seats for staff and guests. Should be priority seating area. I'm
reading from the wrong.
I'm reading from
demands.
Hillary Clinton's appearance contract. Yeah, it's a bit confusing, but the stipulations are similar. The most important one, and our friend Kevin in Northfield pointed this out earlier, is that she wants Kavanaugh to testify, then her to testify after Kavanaugh.
Yes, she wants him to go first. That was one of the first demands.
And so the question, of course, would be, does she want to introduce something new that Kavanaugh would be unable to respond to?
Or did she want to have the last word? Because that's
that too. Yeah,
the
absolutely.
last word sticks with you.
So,
but also it's for her safety too. They want
Yes.
to make sure that they're not in the same room at the same time.
right.
They want Mark Judge subpoenaed and possible other witnesses, which I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, two of the four people that she identified have refuted her account.
Right.
I don't know how much help that would necessarily provide, but okay. So the question really for Senate Republicans now, for Chairman Grassley, do you tell Miss Blasey Ford, hey, look, it's Monday or never?
Or do you take Kavanaugh's testimony on Monday, then wait 3 days to hear from her?
Well, that's
because the biggest hang up right now is the date.
The date, and I would also say I don't know how unyielding Senate Republicans are inclined to be on this other stipulation that's been demanded, which is Senate Judiciary Committees have to ask questions. They can't essentially outsource the Q&A to an independent counsel, which Senate Republicans were looking to do.
Yeah, and they wanted to hire a female outside counsel to ask the questions.
Right, for optical purposes.
Which I say don't bother. Just do it yourself.
The question I want to get feedback from, starting with our next guest, Noah Rothman, is should Grassley and Republicans say, no, I'm sorry, we've already delayed this. There is an opportunity on Monday to present your case and offer whatever it is you want to offer, and that's more than fair. Otherwise, we're going to move on from here.
And if I were in her shoes, I'd want to get this over with. I mean, she could have taken a train here already or driven her car here. They've given her ample time.
So, with that question posed, let's bring in our friend Noah Rothman, who's going to, by the way, be with us October 27th for our Freedom Family Summit Fest.
It's called Freedom Summit Chicago, and you can get your tickets at freedomsummitchicago.com.
Noah Rothman, associate editor for Commentary Magazine. Noah, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what should Grassley do?
Well, if Dr. Ford's attorneys had provided something a little less than this litany of asks, many of which are probably negotiating positions from which they're going to climb down, some of which Republicans have already said are ridiculous and won't be entertained, and said we want to delay this in maybe 4 days to next Thursday as opposed to next Monday, they probably would have gotten it. But because they've asked all these rather outlandish requests, I don't suspect that that's in the offing. Some of them, like you said, they want to be interrogated by Senate Judiciary Republicans and not a counsel. Strikes me as pretty reasonable, frankly, and I don't think Republicans should have entertained the notion that just because they are this panel of old white men that they're questioning is illegitimate and the optics are ugly, they should just reject that flat out.
Totally agree.
It's nakedly prejudicial. But they entertained it because they're closer to their constituents than I am. They probably know that the optics aren't going to be really all that great ahead of the midterm elections, and so they did actually want that option. But I think that's a reasonable request from Dr. Ford's office.
But what about
the rest of it?
Yeah, what about the issue though?
The rest of it is silly.
Yeah, but what about the issue? If it all just came down to the big issue of the sequencing of it, he testifies on Monday, then they've got 2 days to pull together their rebuttal and perhaps, again, try and jackpot him and Senate Republicans with some new allegation that couldn't be proven or disproven, or even perhaps intelligent questions couldn't be asked about in real time.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable concern. And also the calendar is not an artificial one here for Republicans. The term for the new Supreme Court begins on October 1st. They want to have this justice confirmed. So he needs to be recommended out of committee before the end of this week, and there needs to be a full Senate vote next week.
Oh, that's why they're waiting till Thursday, right? Or they want to?
Right, probably, yes. I mean, ideally, they would like to delay this justice.
All right. Well, what about
so that the court is a 4-4 split.
Yep. What about Mark Judge? They want him subpoenaed, and other possible witnesses. Is anybody going to bite on that?
Well, the Republican response so far has been a reasonable one, and that is the witness does not get to dictate what witnesses we call or whom we subpoena, and that seems a pretty reasonable thing to me. Republicans also politically don't want Mike Judge testifying. He's a gentleman with a checkered past. He's most famous for a memoir in which he describes his affinity for alcohol, verging on alcoholism, and his experience of being blackout drunk as a teenager, and his the pseudonym which we think was Brett Kavanaugh is his associate Bart O. Kavanaugh. So this would not reflect well on Judge Kavanaugh, no matter what was said in that testimony, just by virtue of the gentleman's character, and that they want to avoid that.
Well, then also, too, I mean, if you start entertaining the witnesses she wants called, then you have to entertain witnesses that Kavanaugh may want called or that they feel need to be called, and then you start to really push out the timeline on this matter.
Right. Yeah, and like we said before, this is the drop-dead date is next week. They need to have this justice confirmed, and they will. There's very few obstacles in their way, I suspect, unless these hearings are an absolute travesty for Brett Kavanaugh and something unforeseen happens, and they could. This is a big wild card, a lot of variables here at play. They're going to have their vote.
I want to get your reaction to this controversy that Ed Whalen created yesterday. He's the head of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, former clerk for Justice Scalia. He's a serious guy, thoughtful guy, but he sort of put together this possible explanation for what's happened, and it's something similar to what Orrin Hatch and others have said, a case of mistaken identity. But he was much more specific in laying out the house that this could have happened, the individual that she may be thinking of, who's not Brett Kavanaugh, even though he has no particular knowledge of the events of that night. So it's just sort of like an alternate theory that a criminal defense attorney might present, but it brings in people that are otherwise not under scrutiny now, and it sort of starts to cast some shadows over them. And do you think that was appropriate or helpful?
No. I'm still really crestfallen over what happened last night. Mr. Whalen's a really serious guy. He's got a very good reputation on Capitol Hill, and he decided inexplicably to accuse a private individual in Atlanta, Georgia, middle school teacher of rape. That's libelous, and I don't know what he was thinking. And if there's any connection whatsoever to Brett Kavanaugh or the people around him in the fact that this happened, Brett Kavanaugh's nomination is done. And it was an extraordinarily reckless thing for him to do. All of us in this ether have been sort of privy to the rumors that there was going to be something coming out from him. I don't think anybody expected that it was something so reckless, so embarrassing as what occurred last night. Now, it's just a Twitter thread right now, so it has about as much force of weight of opinion as it's just one man's tweet. But that being said, it's a very serious thing, and it's very sad to see Ed Whalen sacrifice the kind of credibility he's built up over the course of several years on something so inexplicable as the course of action he took last night.
Now, Whalen, in his tweet thread, did say, "I have no idea what, if anything, did or did not happen in that bedroom at the top of the stairs. Therefore, I do not state or imply or insinuate that this gentleman he names, which I will not, or anyone else committed the sexual act that Ford alleges," and he goes on and so on and so forth. So he stipulates that he doesn't know. This is just a theory. But I mean, again, even with that stipulation, it's it was a bit uncomfortable for me to read, particularly coming from him.
No, yeah, you can't say I'm not saying this thing that I'm saying, and then everybody gets to pretend like you didn't say it.
Yeah.
He's making a very clear accusation that wasn't veiled. It wasn't alleged. It wasn't some there weren't any caveats associated with it. He had blueprints and working off open source and private information, and then presenting side-by-side high school yearbook pictures of these people to demonstrate that they did actually look quite a bit like each other. But that's totally circumstantial and extremely inappropriate for a private individual. And just because you say, I'm not actually alleging this, doesn't mean you're not alleging this. This is probably actionable, and I think there's a lot of legal exposure here for Mr. Whalen.
One too many episodes of Law and Order, maybe, for Ed. He is Noah Rothman, Associate Editor for Commentary Magazine. He'll be one of our featured speakers at Freedom Summit on October 27th. Noah, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to get tickets, go to freedomsummitchicago.com. That's freedomsummitchicago.com. Again, tickets will sell out, so don't miss out on your chance to join us on Saturday, October 27th at the Westin Chicago in Itasca. This year is presented by Geiger Wealth Management, Chicago's retirement experts. Again, freedomsummitchicago.com. And Noah Rothman joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.